Hello, and welcome back to our study of the book of Mark. Today we're looking at Mark chapter 3, verses 20 through 30, and we're going to be answering the question of what is the unforgivable sin and how you can avoid it. I'll read starting in verse 20. Then Jesus entered a house, and again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, for they said, "He is out of his mind." And the teachers of the law who came down from Jerusalem said, "He is possessed by Beelzebub. By the prince of demons he is driving out demons." So Jesus called them and spoke to them in parables. "How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan opposes himself and is divided, he cannot stand. His end has come. In fact, no one can enter a strong man's house and carry off his possessions unless he first ties up the strong man. Then he can rob his house. I tell you the truth. All the sins and blasphemies of men will be forgiven to them. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. He is guilty of an eternal sin." He said this because they were saying he has an evil spirit. So what we've been seeing throughout this chapter of the book of Mark, and really all of the book of Mark, is Jesus has been starting his ministry, and he's been going out, and what has he been doing? He's been healing the sick, he's been demonstrating his authority, and he's been casting out demons. Those are the things that we've seen over and over and over again. He demonstrated his authority over the Sabbath. He demonstrated that he was there to heal people, to forgive people's sins, and also he was casting out demons. And we've seen so far that the Pharisees keep coming and challenging him. And it seems like all those challenges are okay, because Jesus answered their challenges. He would say, "Hey guys, is it lawful? Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Or should we do evil?" So he doesn't have a problem with them questioning him. He doesn't have a problem with them challenging him. And here's something very interesting. His family shows up, and it says his family comes to take charge of him. They're like, "Oh, we got him, people. We got him. Because they said he's out of his mind. Jesus' family thought he was out of his mind. And here they are to get him. So when you think about, Mary and Joseph, if he was alive, we don't hear about Joseph here, but Jesus' brothers, they didn't follow Jesus during Jesus' ministry. They thought he was nuts. And here's biblical evidence of that. Now later on in Acts, we see them in the upper room, and we see, of course, Mary at the cross. And so they do come back around. And we see Jesus' brothers becoming leaders in the church and even writing epistles like the Epistle of James. They come around, but at this point, they think he's nuts. So what does that tell us? Jesus is okay with challenges. Jesus isn't bothered by people asking questions or even thinking he's crazy. That's fine. He can still work, and they still have the opportunity to come around and come back to him. And that's what happened with his family. Here they think is crazy, and later in Acts they're preaching the gospel and becoming leaders in the church. So thinking Jesus is crazy, that's all right. Asking questions, challenging him, that's okay. But there's a step too far. And that step too far was when they began to attribute the work of God that was being done through Jesus, or the work of the Holy Spirit specifically that's being done through Jesus, and say that that was the work of Satan. So what they're doing is they're attributing the work of God to Satan. And that is when Jesus draws the line and says, "Guys, really? Let's think about this here. If Satan is opposing Satan, he's an idiot, right? You can't fight against yourself. If you're fighting against yourself, you're going to fail. If your house is divided, and by house he's talking about the whole family. If they're divided, it's going to fall apart. When you have civil war, things fall apart. So if Satan is casting out Satan, he's an idiot, and he's just going to fall. that can't be what's happening, guys. That makes no sense. That's the first thing he points out. And then he says, no, Satan is a strong man. And how do you deal with a strong man? By being a stronger man. You've got to tie him up. You have to neutralize the threat of the strong man in order to then, he's the example of plundering his goods. So here you go. He's saying, no, what's happening is someone stronger and more powerful has come and is taking over what belongs to Satan. He's taking it away from him. So we might think of stealing as a bad thing, which it is. We're not supposed to steal. But in this case, he's talking about God breaking in and stealing the world back from Satan. Stealing people's lives back from the power of Satan. So that's the example that he's giving here. And then he says, I tell you the truth, all the sins and blasphemies of men will be forgiven. Oh, you think I'm crazy? That can be forgiven. You want to challenge me? That can be forgiven. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. He is guilty of an eternal sin. You've gone a step too far when you're attributing God's work to Satan. So I think, who is doing this? The Pharisees, the religious leaders. We need to be careful, if we're Christians, that we don't do this. That we don't see God working in our world and say, that's Satan at work. And believe me, guys, I've heard Christians do that very thing. I've heard Christians hear stories of miracles happening and say, well, the devil likes to falsify miracles. Well, wait a minute. Why would the devil want to do a miracle? Say, like, if Christian people are praying and asking for healing and then they're healed, why would the devil heal them to take them away from God? No, that gives God the glory. That doesn't make any sense. And so Christians, we need to be careful to always give God the glory. Don't give to Satan the glory that belongs to God. That is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And it's funny that we argue so much. People are always like, ooh, what's blasphemy against the Holy Spirit? I'm not sure. This passage tells you. It's right here. He tells them this. He says that blasphemy against the Holy Spirit will never be forgiven. Why? Because they were saying he has an evil spirit. He tells you right away. The reason he is saying don't blaspheme against the Holy Spirit is because they're saying that Jesus was doing the work of Satan. So attributing God's work to Satan, that's what blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is. And one more thing. If you're worried that you've committed the unpardonable sin, that's probably a good sign that you haven't. Because people who are blaspheming against the Holy Spirit have very hard hearts. And really, you've got to have a hard heart if you're going to accuse God of doing the devil's work. That's our thought for today. God bless you. Have a great week.